Hauma ne Miss Burns minania ne onabidekare ne kova witukimara ne pasia panovigayo ne anit to goitinema ne washu. Hey everybody, my name is Miss Burns, and I'm of the Salt Eaters from Coble, California, Paiute, and also the Hot Water people of Benton, California. I'm also part Washa. I'm really glad to be here for you guys today because it's a very exciting week. It's reading week, and I'm so happy to hear that many of the community have come out to read to you, to be with you, to present to you. Yes, reading is that important. I'm so glad that everybody is here to remind you of that. I'm going to remind you of that too. All right. Reading is very important. Reading is fun. You just have to find your type of book. All right. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite books that I like to read to my kids. I've read to every single one of my children this very book, and it has a beautiful moral at the end. And I think it has a beautiful story. Some people say it's like the native Cinderella. So I'm going to share that with you today. All right. And what this book is called, maybe you've read it already. It's called The Rough-Faced Girl. Love The Rough-Faced Girl by Rafi Martin and David Shannon. You guys ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Let's get started. Okay, once long ago, there was a village by the shores of Lake Ontario. Off from the other wigwams of the village stood one great huge wigwam. Painted on the sides were pictures of the moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And inside the wigwam, there was said to live a very great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome invisible being. However, no one could see him except his sister who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry the invisible being, but his sister said, only the one who can see him can marry him. Next page. Now, in this village, there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. The 2 older daughters were cruel and hard-hearted, and they made their younger sisters sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, the sparks fell on her. In time, her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms, too, became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by the fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those 2 older sisters laughed at her, saying, "Huh, you're ugly, you rough-faced girl." And they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. It's not very nice. One day, these 2 older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces. Give us some new buckskin dresses. Give us some pretty beaded moccasins. We're going to marry the invisible being." So their father gave them these things. Dressed in their finest, the 2 girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared. "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those 2 girls were proud and hard-hearted before, they were even prouder now. They walked haughtily through the village. At last, they came to the wigwam of the invisible being. And there was his sister waiting. Think she was happy? "Why have you come?" she asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why we're here." "If you want to marry my brother," she replied, "you have had to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can't you see how pretty we are? Can't you see the beautiful clothes we wear? Oh yes, anyone can tell. We've truly seen the invisible being." "All right, she said quietly. If you think you've seen him, then tell me, what's his bow made of? And suddenly, her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. His bow? They stammered in surprise. His, bow. We know. But turning desperately to one another, they whispered, what shall we say? Let's say it's the oak tree. So they said, it's the oak tree. No, said the sister of the invisible being. No, oh, she saw at once how they'd lied. Tell me, she continued, if you think you've seen my brother, the invisible being, then what's the runner of his sled made of? Oh, we know, cried these two sisters. But whispering feverishly again, they wondered, what shall we say? What shall we say? Let's say it's the great willow branch. No, said the sister when she heard, no, you have not seen my brother. Now go home. He's just test us fairly, they exclaimed. We've seen him. Just don't ask us all these silly questions. All right, said his sister of the invisible being. Come with me. And she took them back to the great wigwam and sat them in the seats furthest from the entrance, the guest seats. Soon they heard footsteps coming along the path. Then something stepped inside. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters still couldn't see a thing. Suddenly, a great bow and a beaded quiver of arrows appeared in the air and were set down. But those two sisters sat there, their eyes wide, all through that night. They never saw a thing more. And in the morning, they had to go home, ashamed. The next day, the rough-faced girl went to her father and said, Father, may I please have some beads? May I please have a new buckskin dress and some pretty moccasins? I'm going to marry the invisible being, for wherever I look, I see his face. But her father sighed. Oh, daughter, he said, I am sorry I have no beads left for you. Only some old broken shells. I have no buckskin dress, and as for moccasins, all I have left are my old, worn out, cracked, and stretched out pair from last year. And they're much too big. But she said, whatever you can spare, I can use. So he gave her these things. Then she found dried reeds, and taking the little broken shell, she strung a necklace. She stripped birch bark from the dead trees and made a cap, a dress, and leggings. Then with a piece of sharp bone, she carved in the bark pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. She went down to the lake shore and soaked the moccasins in the water until they grew soft. Then she molded them to her feet, but they were still a little too big, and they flapped like duck's feet as she walked. Then all the people came out of their wigwams. They pointed and stared. Look at that ugly girl, they laughed. Look at her strange clothes. Hey, go home, you ugly girl. You'll never marry the invisible being. But the red-faced girl, she had faith in herself. And she had courage. She didn't turn back. She just kept walking right through that village. Good for her. As she walked on, she saw the great beauty of the earth and the sky spreading before her. And truly, she alone of all the village saw in these things the sweet yet awesome face of the invisible being. At last she came to the lake shore just as the sun was sinking behind the hills and the many stars came glittering out like a fiery veil in the darkening sky overhead. And there, standing by the water's edge, was the sister of the invisible being. Now, the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman. When she looked at you, she didn't just see your face or your hair or your clothes. No, when she looked at you, she looked right into your eyes and can see all the way down to your heart. And she could tell if you had a good heart, kind one, a cold or hard and cruel one. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once that though her skin was scarred, her hair burnt, her clothes strange, she had a beautiful, kind heart. And so she welcomed her dearly, saying, "Oh, sister, why have you come?" And the rough-faced girl replied, "I have come to marry the invisible being." "Oh," said the sister very gently now, "if you want to marry him, you have had to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen my brother, the invisible being?" And the rough-faced girl said, "Yes." "All right then," said the sister, "if you have had seen him, tell me, what's his bow made of?" And the rough-faced girl said, "His bow? Why, it's the great curve of the rainbow." "Oh," exclaimed his sister in excitement. "Tell me," she asked, "if you have seen my brother, the invisible being, what's the runner of his sled made of?" And the rough-faced girl, looking up into the night sky, said, "The runner of his sled? Why, it's the spirit road, the Milky Way of stars that spreads across the sky." "Aw," cried the sister in wonder and delight. "You have seen him. Come with me." And taking the rough-faced girl by the hand, she led her back to the great wigwam, sat her in the seat next to the entrance seat, the wife seat. Then they heard footsteps coming along the path, closer and closer. The entrance flap of the wigwam lifted, and in stepped the invisible being. And when he saw her sitting there, he said, "At last, we have been found out." Then smiling kindly, he added, "And oh, my sister, she is beautiful." And his sister said, "Yes." The sister of the invisible being then gave the rough-faced girl the finest buckskin robes and a necklace of perfect shell. "Now, bathe in the lake," she said, "and dress in these." So the rough-faced girl bathed in the waters of the lake. Suddenly, all the scars vanished from her body. Her skin grew smooth again, and her beautiful black hair grew in long and glossy as a raven's wing. Now, anyone could see that she was indeed beautiful, but the invisible being and his sister had seen that from the start. Then, at last, the rough-faced girl and the invisible being were married. They lived together in great gladness, and they were never apart. Beautiful story. The best part about that story was we know that beauty comes from here, right? Inside your heart. We may not always get to have a gift of seeing through your eyes down to your heart, but we just trust that people have really kind, beautiful hearts. And when they have kind, beautiful hearts, sometimes that just comes out to the outside. All right. So I'm so glad to be here reading to you all one of my favorite books. I hope you all can find the book, read it yourself, and share the book with one of your sisters or a parent or a family member, a grandma, a grandpa, an auntie, a cousin. This is a very beautiful book that I love to share with my children, and now I've shared with you. So take this beautiful book, this gift, and share it with somebody else. All right. Thank you all. Sa amupunirua. Take care.